The hospital called to tell me that my father had dementia. But my name wasn't in the visitor log. 48 hours later, I was standing in the rain outside our house holding 3 keys, none of which felt right. After the funeral, I returned to my mother's house in the suburbs of Portland and realized that silence has weight. It didn't just hang in the living room. It pressed on my chest. I sat on the floor among the boxes and began sorting through them. Photo albums, cups with lipstick marks, napkins that my mother ironed even when she ate alone. I left her favorite white cup with a crack near the handle on the table. Throwing it away would feel like betrayal. The phone rang as I was putting sweaters into a bag, for charity. The screen read, "County Hospital. Is this Richard Matthews' daughter?" The woman's voice was calm and tired. "Yes. Your father is here. Early dementia. He can't be left alone. We need a legal contact to pick him up and arrange for further care." We hadn't spoken in over 10 years. The last image of our life together. I'm standing at the door with a suitcase, my mother is behind me, squeezing my sleeve, and he can't take his eyes off the newspaper. "Go if you want." I left. Now in the room with her things, I suddenly heard a voice inside me. "I don't love him, but I won't give him away to strangers." "I'll come today," I said, even though my heart was in my throat. County Hospital smelled of coffee and disinfectant. At the reception desk, they asked me for my ID. "You are listed as..." The nurse scrolled through the screen. "I'm sorry, the contact person here is L. Walker." "Who?" "I don't know. But this person signed the last consent form for the examination last week. Do you have any documents proving your relationship? A birth certificate will do." She said it matter-of-factly, as if she hadn't just peeled my skin off in one motion. "Last week? We buried Mom yesterday. Who even came to see him last week?" In the ward, my father sat by the window, staring at the parking lot as if the answer were there. His cheeks were slightly sunken, his hands like paper. "Dad," I said, trying to speak evenly. He turned slowly. "Anna," he smiled quietly. "You always come when it smells like rain." "It's Emma," I corrected him. Not because I wanted to be right, but because I wanted to be seen. He blinked, trying to focus his eyes, and frowned. "Oh, you. It's good that it's you. They'll bring tea in a minute." A nurse came in, her badge said, "Haley. Richard, you have a visitor." To me. "Are you Emma? We already called. He's been with us for a week." There were 2 episodes of disorientation at home. The neighbors called 911. "Who signed the consent form for the examination last week?" Haley looked at my face. "In the visitor log, Lillian W. She said she was a close family friend. Do you know her?" "I know the name," I said slowly. Mom's conversations about Lillian's friend were fragmented. "She brought him." Haley smiled slightly. "Lemon pie. He hardly ate anything, but he ate the pie." When Haley left, my father looked up at me. "Anna isn't angry?" "No, Dad," I replied. I didn't have the strength to explain death a second time. The doctor on duty, a tall Asian man with neat handwriting, introduced himself as Dr. Chun. He evaluated the tests, talked about treatment plans, and the need for home care. He needs someone nearby. The next few weeks are critical. "Do you have guardianship papers?" "Not yet. I'll give you a list of adult protective services, respite programs, and a neurology clinic. And," he lowered his voice, "don't leave him alone at the stove. He's already had an incident. A pot caught fire." I nodded. I didn't even have time to imagine the stove. My heart raced ahead of my thoughts. On the way home, he clutched his seatbelt like a student before an exam. "Who are you talking to?" I asked when he whispered something. "Anna," he replied honestly. "She says there are creaky doors in the house that I don't open." The door creaked in my house when we entered. A real creak, not a metaphorical one. I had prepared the guest room. Clean bedding, a glass of water, soft lighting. On the nightstand was a nightlight with a warm glow. "It's nice here," he said. "It's nice when the wood on the table is warm." He opened his suitcase. Inside were not things but traces. A razor without a blade, a scratched glasses case, a red flat leather wallet, and a small black notebook with an elastic band. "May I?" I asked. "My lines are in there," he replied. So you don't lose them. We won't lose them, I said, even though I already knew I would open it at night. I stuck a schedule on the refrigerator with a marker. Breakfast 8 o'clock, walk 11 o'clock. And attached icons: a cup, a plate, a bed. I put rubber anti-slip stickers in the bathroom. I put child locks on the stove. I put in a new electric kettle with an auto-off feature. I equipped the front door with an invisible bell that rings when it is opened. Is it for a short time? He asked before going to sleep. As long as it takes. I don't want to be a mistake, he said suddenly. You're not a mistake, I replied faster than I thought. And I felt like I was saying it to myself too. I woke up to a rustling sound. The clock read 2:17. My father was standing in my doorway. And don't go, he whispered. It's me, Emma. I got up, showed him to the guest room and tucked him in. The nightlight on the nightstand came on. And comes with the rain, he muttered. She'll tell us where the key is. The key? I thought about my mother's house. About how Lillian had arranged for Mom to have peace. About how in the hospital records it wasn't me, it was Elle Walker. I returned to my room with a throbbing temple. That night I decided. Tomorrow I would call Adult Protective Services and the neurology clinic. Another thought was spinning in my head. I would find Lillian and see the documents. Before falling asleep again, I picked up the black notebook. The pages were filled with neat, tidy handwriting. Dates, short phrases. I called it care, but it was fear. Shame is also a lock. She says, the key is in the drawer where the tickets are. Closed it. My mother really did have a drawer with tickets. Old boarding passes, museum receipts, even pieces of paper from the cinema. Then I'll think about it. At 7:50 I was making an omelet. My father sat at the table and ran his fingers over the wood, as if warming his hands on it. Nice table, he said. Warm. Food will be ready in 5 minutes. The doorbell rang. It was the courier from the pharmacy. Nurse Haley had prepared the first set of medications. I put the box in the kitchen and went back for my wallet. Took about 30 seconds. When I came back, my whole body tensed up, smoke. My father was standing at the stove with the gas burner on which stood an empty old kettle he had found for convenience. The bottom was already blackened. The smoke stung my eyes. Get away. I pushed him away sharply, turned off the gas, grabbed the pot holders, pulled the kettle into the sink and opened the windows. The smoke detector squeaked like an angry baby bird. I wanted tea. He looked frightened and guilty. We have an electric kettle. I pointed to the new one on the other side of the kitchen. No gas. Understand? No. He nodded, but I could see he didn't understand. My hands were shaking. On my wrist was a fresh burn from a drop of hot metal. I ran cold water over it and gritted my teeth. Then I took a marker and stuck a red sticker I had cut out right on the stove. And oh, I photographed the burn. Not for social media, for APS. 20 minutes later, I had already submitted an online application. Safety assessment needed. My father with dementia lives with me. Incident with the stove, risk of fire. Click submit. Without save draft. I felt ashamed and relieved at the same time. At the neurology clinic, we were seen by Dr. Mark Mason, a young man with an unhurried gaze. He addressed my father, not me, and for some reason that was reassuring. Mr. Matthews, how are you today? Better than yesterday. She added honey to my porridge. He pointed at me as if it were an important fact. Mark ran some tests, asked him to walk down the hallway, and tapped his reflexes with a hammer. At the end, he said to me privately, this isn't just forgetfulness. The brain is looking for safe rooms, memories where it was warm. That's where names are attached. That's why he calls you Anna. It's not that he can't see you. It's his way of finding warmth. I want him to call my name someday, not by accident. He will when you become his safe room, Mark replied calmly. Practically speaking. Strict kitchen rules, a locator on the key, 20-minute windows for yourself, and 2 people on standby. Without this you'll burn out. And also, I hesitated but said, Lillian W. was in the hospital visitor log. She signed the consent form. Check with the social worker and if necessary with a lawyer. Who signs medical consent forms is about access to decisions. You need a guardianship line. He wrote a referral for additional tests and on his way out added, "Avoid gas. Use only electricity. And a door alarm is a must." At 3:02 p.m. the doorbell rang. Inspector Melissa from APS, neat hair, clipboard, tone like a first-grade teacher. "We received your request. This is a standard safety assessment." She walked through the house. Handrails, non-slip carpet, schedule on the refrigerator, child locks on the stove, invisible doorbell. In the guest room, she stopped at a photo of my mother on the beach. "Is this Anna?" "Yes. You've done everything right," she said. "I'll arrange respite vouchers for a few hours a week." And she looked straight at me. "You have the right to take a break without feeling guilty. I need Lillian W.'s name and contact details." I pressed. She signed the consent form at the hospital. "We can find that out through hospital social work. Give me a written request and I'll pass it on." When Melissa left, I finally allowed myself to sit down. My legs were shaking as if I had run a marathon. Not from heroism but from sheer fear. She came in as if she had been waiting on the porch for the APS motorcade to disappear. A box of lemon cake in her hands, the same smell Haley had mentioned. She stood confidently in the doorway, like someone who knew this house. Although it was my house, not my mother's. "You're Emma," she smiled. "I'm Lillian, Anna's friend." She came in, found some cups, poured tea, and set out the pie. She glanced toward the guest room. "How is he?" "He confuses names. And time. And dangers. Forgetting is sometimes a salvation," she said calmly. "But not always for those around him." "You signed a consent form at the hospital," I said bluntly. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that Anna asked me to look after him if anything happened to him," Lillian replied evenly. "I've been there for him these last few years. Why not me? I'm his daughter." "You were far away," she said, as if it were not a reproach but a fact. "On paper, I have power of attorney for medical decisions. Temporary. On me. I want to see the documents. I'll show you. And something else." She took a sip of tea. "Anna's house. It's more complicated than you think. They bought it and kept it for themselves for peace of mind." I repeated her words. "I need copies. I'll bring them tomorrow." "And Emma." She put her hand on the pie box. "I'm not the enemy." She left, leaving citrus on the table and unease in me. I wrote to community legal aid, briefly described the situation, asked for advice. In 10 minutes the reply came. "If the documents are signed voluntarily and certified, it is difficult to appeal. Send copies." I didn't have any copies, and that made me the angriest. Irene showed up an hour later, without calling, with shiny hair and a box of organic snacks. "I brought something useful," she smiled. "You look exhausted." "I didn't call you. I took care of it." "That's different. I heard there was a service here." "Good. They're keeping an eye on the situation." She walked around the house like an inspector and stopped at the guest room. "Uncle Richard, it's me, Irene," she said loudly, as if he were deaf. "Anna," he replied softly. "Don't be angry." Irene looked at me confused. "This is difficult." "Yes. I'll take him to the park for an hour. You take a shower, eat, pretend you have a life." "I won't pretend," I said. "I'll take a shower." They came back with ice cream stains on their shirts and laughter in the hallway. My father was calmer than he had been all day. "She laughs like Anna used to," he said. As Irene was leaving, she threw over her shoulder. "I'll come every Saturday, even if you're angry." "I will be," I replied honestly. "But come anyway." After my shower, I returned to the thought of the drawer with the tickets. My mother had one in her house, in the living room, an old chest of drawers where she kept all her small papers. Now my mother's house is no longer mine. But I had a box just like it. My mother had brought it for the duration of the renovation, and it had stayed there ever since. I opened it. Inside were old boarding passes, museum tickets, a shopping list, and a key on a brass key ring. Old heavy. The key ring was engraved with Elm. My mother's house on Elm Street. A key to what? I whispered to myself. I put the key on the table and picked up the black notebook again. I flipped through the pages until I came across a more recent date, 2 months ago. I am not to blame for the house. I am to blame for my silence. I took a breath and turned the page. The next entry was from a week ago. She says, "Tell the truth. If Emma finds out, let her hear it from me." The last line was thin, as if written in a whisper, and it sent a chill through my whole body. I signed for Anna. In her name. To save the house. My fingers trembled. Mom's signature. The papers for the house. Lillian with her retirement paperwork. In the hospital, her initials in the consent form. If he signed her name, who in this story is the savior, and who is the violator? And what do those clean documents that Lillian will bring me tomorrow mean now? In the kitchen, the locator on the keys ticked quietly. Outside the window, it started to rain. The same rain after which my mother would make tea and say, "Breathe." I sat with a notebook in my hands and felt the air in the room change density. My father and I had just crossed the threshold of the house, and it turned out that there was a foreign foundation under our feet. The night light in the guest room flickered. My father stirred in bed and whispered through his sleep, "Anna, the key is in the drawer with the tickets. Don't judge, just do the right thing." I looked at the brass elm on the table and realized that this was not just going to be a care case. There would be a trial with documents, past mistakes, and people who call fear love. And if he really did sign with someone else's name, then tomorrow when Lillian brings the papers, I will either see the truth or a new lock. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of lemon. Lillian brought a pie, yesterday's, and the air still held its aroma. The kitchen was quiet. My father was sitting by the window, looking out at the yard, where puddles were forming after the night rain. "Lillian is coming today," I said, opening the coffee. "She already came," he replied. "When?" "Yesterday. I don't remember exactly when. She left me a key." I froze. "What key?" "To the house. She said it was still ours." I walked over to him. In his robe pocket he held a small silver key on a red string. Not the brass one with elm engraved on it, another one. "She gave you this?" He nodded. "She said all is not lost." The coffee maker let out its last breath of steam. I glanced at the clock, 7:30. Lillian was supposed to arrive with the papers in 2 hours. She wasn't late. A gray raincoat, precise movements, a black briefcase in her hands. She walked in like someone who didn't need an invitation. "Good morning. I brought everything you asked for." I pointed to the table. "Lay it out." Inside were notarized copies, a power of attorney, a purchase agreement signed by Richard A. Matthews. "All the documents are in order," she said. "I drew them up at his request. The house officially belonged to me, but Anna actually lived there until the end." "And you think that's fair?" "I think it was the only way to save her from her creditors." I leafed through the pages. The date of sale was 2 weeks after my mother was admitted to the hospital. She wouldn't have signed anything then. She didn't even leave her room. "Richard did it for her," Lillian said quietly, "so she wouldn't lose the house." I looked up. "You realize this is forgery?" "I understand it was desperation," she replied. "And I was part of it." "So you knowingly put the property in your name, knowing the signature wasn't hers?" Lillian clasped her hands. "Anna knew. Later. She forgave me," she said. "Now I have a roof over my head and there won't be a court case." Her voice trembled. I was torn between two feelings, anger and a strange sense of relief. "I'm still going to take these papers to community legal aid." "Of course," she nodded. "But let me say one thing. He didn't do it for the house. He was afraid of losing her." I didn't answer. She gathered the documents, leaving copies, and before leaving, she touched the edge of the table. "I loved your mother, Emma. Everything else is just a consequence." At 2 p.m. Michelle, a lawyer from the free program, called. I looked over the copies. Technically, the agreement appears to be valid, but there's something strange. The form of the notarial certification. What's wrong with it? The notary's handwriting and the witness's signature match. It's either a mistake or a forgery. Can you prove it? If we find the notary himself or his archival records, who is it? The name here is L. Walker. I felt my throat go dry. You mean Lillian Walker? If it's the same person, she's not just a witness. She drew up her own agreement. And that's a violation of the law. I thanked him and hung up the phone. There was a silver key on the table. My father was dozing in his chair, a notebook on his lap. I opened the last entry. She said, "Do the right thing." I did the best I could. But someone has to tell the truth while I still remember. At 6 in the evening I heard a crash. A broken mug lay in the kitchen, the floor was covered with tea, and my father was sitting on the floor, holding his head. "Dad!" I rushed to him. "What happened?" "I was looking for the key," he replied, his words slurred. "She said it was under the sink." I noticed blood on his hand, a cut from the glass. A minute later he lost consciousness. Called 911. The paramedics acted quickly. His blood pressure was low, his pulse was weak. One of them, a bearded man, said, "It could be a mini-stroke. We need to take him to the hospital." I rode behind the ambulance, clasping my hands together. Inside, only one question pulsed. Was it because of stress or because of me? In the emergency room they made me wait. Half an hour later, Haley, the same nurse, came out. "His condition is stable, but he'll have to stay overnight. Can I see him?" "In a few minutes." When I went in, he was lying under a blanket, pale, his eyes half closed. "Dad, I'm here. Don't tell anyone about the signature," he whispered. "She won't be able to handle it." "Who is she?" But he had already fallen asleep. Haley stood nearby and wrote something down on her tablet. "He wasn't talking about you," she said quietly. "He mentioned you before too. We thought it was his wife. She's dead. Maybe another one. He's often asked for his documents. He gets nervous. Once he snapped at the notary saying, 'You signed the wrong thing.' I clutched my bag. 'Can you show me his visitor history?' 'It's against policy, but I'll take a look,' she said, lowering her voice. 'If I see anything strange, I'll let you know.' The next morning when I returned from the hospital, Inspector Melissa from APS was standing in the yard. "We got another call," she said. "Anonymous. They reported that the patient was left unattended and injured." "That's not true. I was at home. It was a mini-stroke. We have to check it out." In the living room she photographed the stove, the red NO sticker, the first aid kit, and the medical containers. "I have to write up a temporary report. They may keep it at the hospital until they investigate." "Who called?" "That's confidential. But you can guess, can't you?" I guessed. Irene. Her overly correct concern, too many phrases like, "I took care of it." "We'll figure it out," I said sharply. "I'm not hiding anything." Melissa nodded. "I can see that. But the system has to record it." When she left, I sat down on the stairs and cried for the first time in a week, quietly without a sound. Not out of grief, out of exhaustion. In the evening, a short message came from an unknown number. L. Walker. Hospital volunteer. Not just a friend. Check her name in the registry. I froze. Only Haley could have written that. I went to the hospital's website. Lillian Walker's name was listed under volunteers. She was listed with 5 visits over the past few months. That meant Lillian had been visiting my father before he was hospitalized. I felt something cold squeeze my stomach. She had been controlling his access to doctors even then. I called Michelle. "I want to file an official report of forgery and fraud." "Emma, be careful," she said. "If he signed something in her name and she knew about it, it's more complicated legally. You'll have to prove intent to defraud." "I have the key, 2 different ones, and her name in the hospital logs. That's enough to get started." "Okay. Bring everything tomorrow. We'll file a request for a temporary freeze on property rights." At 11 p.m. The phone rang. The number was the hospital. "Mrs. Matthews? Your father is missing. He left the ward about an hour ago. Security is checking the cameras." "What do you mean disappeared? You were supposed to be watching him." "He said he was going home." I grabbed my jacket and keys and rushed out. The road was flooded with rain. Drops hit the windshield like buckshot. I knew where he might have gone. Elm Street. My mother's house. Where it all began. When I pulled up, my headlights illuminated the familiar facade. The door was ajar. My father was standing on the porch, wet, in his hospital pajamas, barefoot. He was holding a black notebook in his hands. Dad! I rushed to him. You could die. He stared at the windows of the house as if they were sacred. I promised, he said quietly. I had to return the key. I noticed a third key inserted in the lock by the door. It wasn't brass or silver. It was old and rusty with a hospital tag. Who gave it to you? She did. Lillian. She said I had to open it, and everything would fall into place. I carefully took the key. You're not going anywhere alone anymore. Do you understand? He nodded, but not at me, at the window. She's inside. Anna. I opened the door. It was empty. Only dust and the smell of dampness. But there was an envelope on the floor. On it was my mother's handwriting. For Emma. Picked it up. Inside was an old letter, several photos, and another document. Statement of ownership transfer, signed by Anna Matthews. In the same handwriting as Lillian's. My breath caught in my throat. Mom knew. My father sat down on the stairs, holding the notebook, and said, I did what she asked. She didn't want you to know. I stood in the middle of the empty house, wet from the rain, with the letter in my hands and the feeling that everything I believed in had been turned upside down. He was silent on the drive home. At traffic lights, he would look out the window and whisper, She's at peace now. Who? Anna. She knows what you found. When we got home, he fell asleep in the guest room, fully clothed. I sat next to him with the letter in my hands and read it over and over again. Emma, if you ever find this, know that we all do foolish things to protect each other. Sometimes lies are also a form of care. Don't judge us both. I didn't know who she meant, him, Lillian, or herself. At dawn, Haley called. We found who opened the back door of the hospital on the cameras. It was Lillian Walker. She used her volunteer badge to get him through the service entrance. Did you notify the police? Yes. She's being called in for questioning. But Emma. Haley paused. It seems she's not just a family friend. She's listed in the database as a trustee in several cases involving the property of elderly people. A chill ran through me. You mean fraud? We can't confirm that, but be on your guard. I put down the phone and looked at my notebook. On a new page written tonight. Not all keys open doors. Some open truths. But truths can burn too. I sat in the kitchen holding 3 keys in my hands, a brass elm, a silver one on a string, and a rusty hospital key, and realized that each of them unlocked its own version of the past. And ahead of me was the day when I would have to choose which one to put in the lock. In the morning, I laid out the 3 keys on the table, the brass elm key, the silver key on a red string, and the rusty hospital key, like 3 versions of the truth. Next to them was a letter from my mother, don't judge us both, and copies of the papers from Lillian. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. Ms. Matthews? Detective Cameron Boyle, Financial Crimes Division. Can you come in to give a statement about Lillian Walker? I glanced toward the guest room. My father was asleep, hugging his notebook like a pillow. I can be there in an hour. The police station was cool from the air conditioning. On the detective's desk were folders, photos, and a printer that coughed up paper from time to time. You already know that Mrs. Walker volunteered at the hospital. Boyle shifted his gaze from my face to the copies of the documents. We have information that she was a trusted confidant of several elderly people. 2 of them lost their homes. She's no stranger to our family, I said. She was a friend of my mother's. And, it seems, a participant in the scheme involving our house. Do you have proof? There's a match in the handwriting on the notarized form and the witness's signature, her name in the hospital log, the keys she gave to my father, and my mother's letter, which indirectly confirms that she knew about the unusual agreement. Boyle twirled my copies in his hands, then placed a photo from the hospital's rear entrance cameras on the table. Lillian in a volunteer badge leading my father in the rain. This amounts to an abuse of volunteer authority, he said. And if we prove personal gain, it will be worse. Are you prepared to provide a written statement? Yes. I signed the report. As I was leaving, the detective added, consult with a lawyer about a temporary restraining order, lease pendens, on the house to prevent any transfers while we investigate. If that is your priority. My priority is my father's safety, I replied. But the house is too. At Community Legal Aid, Michelle listened. looked at the photos from the police station and said quietly, "There are two fronts: civil, property, and criminal fraud. On the civil front we file a lease pendens, a freeze on property rights. On the criminal front we cooperate with the police." "Let's do both," I said. "Emma, think about your resources. You have a father with dementia. Court is a marathon. I'm not going to carry this alone." I felt the words coming out harder than I had imagined. "But I won't let our home fall into the wrong hands again. Not at the cost of lies." Michelle nodded. "Okay, I'll file today." Irene was waiting for me at home. She stood on my porch with a bag of groceries, and that look that always combines concern with control. "Did you go to the police station?" she asked without greeting me. "I did. This is a family matter, Emma. Why involve the police?" "Because the volunteer took my father out in the rain at night and was involved in strange dealings with the house." "Lillian is not a criminal," Irene sighed. "She saved Anna. Do you want to throw stones at a woman who was there for you when you weren't?" The words hit me like a slap in the face. I wasn't there because I was kicked out. I felt the old pain rising from the bottom of my heart. And I've had enough of other people's versions of who saved whom. I'm saving my father now. "You always make yourself out to be a hero," she said quietly. "And you're a witness who just cares," I replied. "If you want to help, be useful. If not, don't get in the way." Irene turned away. Then she said unexpectedly, "Okay, I'll sign him up for the Church Day Center twice a week. Free of charge. 3 hours of respite. Why are you doing this?" "Because I'm not a monster, Emma. And because I know what exhaustion looks like on your face." I had to swallow my pride. "It's a deal." At lunchtime I got a video call from Mark. "How is he after last night's episode?" "Stable. But yesterday he had a mini-stroke. Today he's like glass that could crack at the slightest touch." "Remember," Mark said, "the prognosis is not a line, but a curve with dips and rises. Your job is to reduce the dips. Safety routine, 2 people on standby. And, Emma," he looked at me intently, "forgive yourself for your human limitations. Otherwise, you'll turn yourself into another house, held together by forged signatures." His words hit home. I nodded. "One more thing," Mark added. "I've programmed the tracker on the bracelet. If he leaves, you'll see his location. And please replace the extension cord in the living room. I saw sparks on the video when you turned on the lamp." I looked at the old purple extension cord under the table. It did indeed click from time to time. "We'll replace it today." In the evening I decided to tidy up the living room. A new extension cord, a new lamp, and removing excess wires. My father sat on the sofa and flipped through his notebook, as if it kept him afloat. "It will be brighter now," I said. I pulled the old extension cord out of the socket. At that moment my father reflexively reached for the table fan standing nearby. The plug was half in the burnt-out 3-way connector. "No, wait!" I shouted. Too late. A short zzz spark under the sofa, a rustle, and a small tongue of flame licked the carpet. I rushed out of the kitchen with a fire extinguisher, my new fetish after the kettle incident, pulled the pin and sprayed white foam covered the fire. The smoke stung my eyes again, but this time I was breathing evenly. "It's okay," I told him. "It's okay." My father looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "Emma," he said clearly. "Not Anna. Emma." Yes. I felt something warm, almost childlike, opening up inside me. "Thank you," he added, and smiled in a way he hadn't smiled in years. I sat down next to him and gave him my hand. He put his palm on top of mine, dry, light as paper, but here and now. When I washed off the foam and opened the windows, my phone buzzed with messages. First from Michelle. "Lease pendens filed. The court will schedule a hearing within 14 days. Then from an unknown number. "You're going to destroy everything she did for your mother. Leave it alone. Otherwise you'll regret it." No signature. I looked at the screen and felt a chill in my fingers. Was it Lillian? Or someone behind her? I took a screenshot and sent it to Michelle and Detective Boyle. Boyle replied almost immediately. "Save all messages. This is important. Try not to respond." At 9 o'clock in the evening the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was Lillian. No raincoat, no pie, just that same black folder. We need to talk, she said from the doorway. I've already been to the police. They think I'm a monster. You took my father out the back door of the hospital and call it caring. I took him home, she insisted. Where he wanted to go. He nearly froze in the rain. Anna asked that he see the house without fear at least once. Her voice broke. She was afraid you would take away everything he still held on to. I'll take away his risks, I replied. And that's caring too. She closed her eyes for a moment. Emma, I didn't steal from your mother. I covered up her mistakes. She also signed in the wrong place and in the wrong way. She was afraid too. Then let's each take responsibility for our own actions. The documents go to the court, the emotions to us. What if the court takes the house away forever? Maybe it was never ours in the sense that we imagine. Lillian took a step back. I brought more papers. There's a letter from Anna to me. Read it and you'll understand why I did what I did. Leave it. I'll read it with my lawyer. I'm not the enemy, she repeated, her voice weak. I'm the consequence. She left, leaving the folder on the porch. My chest trembled as if I had been running. I closed the door with the chain and suddenly remembered, the locator was on the keys. I looked at the app. The marker was moving. Not mine. My father's. The dot flashed and disappeared. Dad. I rushed into the guest room. It was empty. The window was ajar, the curtain swaying. My heart sank. I rushed into the yard. The damp air after the fire foam smelled of metal and rain. A minute later I was sitting in the car, my fingers tapping on the screen. The tracker app wouldn't load. I called Irene. He's gone. I'm on my way, she said without asking any questions. Where are you checking? Elm Street and... I paused. And the station. He liked to watch the trains. I sped through the empty streets. Red lights flashed at the crossing. The train pulled its dark cars along, and in their rhythm I suddenly saw a silhouette. My father was sitting on the platform under a dim lamp. I braked so sharply that the seatbelt dug into my shoulder. Dad! He raised his head. On his knees was a notebook. His face was calm, almost expressionless. I'm waiting for Anna, he said. She said that a train is also a home on the road. I sat down next to him. Let's go home, Dad. To our warm table. He looked at me for a long time. You're Emma. Yes. Okay, he whispered. Then let's go. I led him to the car. At that moment the tracker on my phone came to life. A green dot appeared at the station. Belated technology caught up with human intuition. At home when he fell asleep I opened Lillian's folder. A letter from my mother fell out. My mother's, no doubt. Lillian, if there is ever a trial, tell Emma the truth. I asked you to register the house in your name. Otherwise we would have lost everything. Richard signed more than once where he had no right to. So did I. We were both afraid. If Emma wants a trial, that's her right. But my request is different. Make this house something that doesn't belong to fear. A children's room. A room of peace. Something where you can breathe without guilt. I sat with the letter in my hands for a long time. The court case is already underway. The police are involved too. My father is between highs and lows. And my mother asks not to drag out the chain of false foundations any further. My phone vibrated. A message from Michelle. The judge has issued a preliminary freeze. But there is a proposal for mediation. We can discuss transferring the house to the community in exchange for an admission of responsibility without criminal charges for the parties, if the police confirm no malicious intent in your case. It's unusual, but it's real. I looked at the table, at the brass elm, the silver key, the rusty hospital key, the notebook, my mother's letter. My father's MO sounded quietly in my head, as if the door to my safe room had opened. I had 3 locks and 3 keys. The trial would go to the end with a chance to win the house but lose myself in the process. To give up and leave everything as it is, forever breathing the dust of lies. To do what my mother called the room of peace. To hand over the house to the community, removing our war from it, and finally removing the role of judge and criminal from myself. I turned off the light in the kitchen, leaving the night light on in the guest room. My father was sleeping soundly. On the nightstand lay a notebook open to a new page. Truth is not ruin. It is scaffolding if you know how to put up the beams. I picked up the phone and dialed Michelle. I'm ready for mediation. But on 2 conditions. What are they? My father's safety, care, and resources. And the condition about the Matthews room. A children's room of peace in our home. Forever. Without our private ownership. Michelle was silent for a second. That's a lot. But we'll have to negotiate with the city. We'll negotiate. I put down the phone. It was drizzling again in the yard. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistled, as if to remind me that home can also be in motion. The mediation was scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. The location was the Portland City Council. A small room with panoramic windows and coffee that smelled of nerves. I arrived early. On the walls were photographs of old houses that had been restored as community centers. Among them was one that looked like ours. The house on Elm Street. My father stayed home with Irene. Mark called at 8. Don't treat this like a trial. It's a negotiation. That's a huge difference. I'll try, I said, even though I knew that for me, every conversation about the house was always a trial. At the table were me, Michelle, a representative of the city council, Mrs. Drake, and Lillian with her lawyer. Lillian looked calm, but her hands were shaking. We do not dispute the transfer itself, Michelle began. We propose something else. The house on Elm Street will become the property of the city. It will be used to create a children's center called the Matthews Room. The documents will state that this decision is an act of reconciliation between the Matthews family. Criminal proceedings will be closed due to lack of malicious intent. Drake looked up from the papers. Unconventional, but beautiful. We can consider this as part of the community renewal program. We need a judge's decision and the consent of both parties. I agree, I said. Lillian was silent for a few seconds, then looked up. If Anna wanted peace, this is probably it. I agree too. Michelle smiled briefly, as lawyers smile when they have won not a case but humanity. Then we'll have the documents ready by Friday. I returned home with a sense of relief similar to the fatigue after a marathon. But there was a police car outside my house. My heart sank again. Irene was standing on the porch, clutching a towel in her hands. He left, she said quietly. I went to the car for a minute. When I came back, he was gone. Again. I already called. He went toward the park. The officer added. A neighbor saw him get into a car with a middle-aged woman. Dark hair, glasses. I didn't ask who it was. I knew. Lillian. I dialed her number, no answer. Then a message came. Don't worry. He just wanted to say goodbye to the house. I'm nearby. Elm Street. I got back behind the wheel. The road seemed longer than ever. When I pulled up, the air already smelled of smoke. The house stood in semi-darkness, with flashes of flame in the kitchen window. No! Escaped from my chest. I jumped out of the car. Lillian was standing by the door, her face blackened by smoke. He's inside, she shouted. The fire started in the kitchen. I didn't have time. I rushed into the house. The smoke stung my eyes, everything flickered orange. Dad! I shouted. Answer me. A hoarse voice came from deep inside. Here. In the living room. I covered my mouth with my sleeve and made my way through the smoke. My father was sitting at the table with a notebook on his lap. Dad, let's go. I can't leave her. He was looking at a photo of my mother hanging on the wall. She said, the house must be cleansed. I grabbed his hands. We'll cleanse it, but alive. He looked at me, his eyes clear, finally free of the fog. Emma, he whispered. Go. I pulled him toward the exit. Lillian helped open the back door. When we stepped outside, smoke billowed in clouds. Sirens arrived in a minute, firefighters and 2 more. My father sat on the curb, covered with a blanket. I saw her, he said quietly. She was smiling. I sat down next to him. Me too, Dad, I whispered. All that remained was a charred tree and the smell of fire. The firefighter said it was a short circuit. Old wiring in the kitchen. Irony. The house where it all began with signatures and lies ended in a fire that no one planned. The next day, there was a short headline in the news. Old house on Elm Street damaged by fire. The Matthews family and a volunteer were unharmed. The city promises to restore the building for public use. I sat in the hospital room next to my father. Mild smoke inhalation, nothing critical. He was asleep. There was a notebook on the nightstand. I opened it to the last page. Fire doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it just brings a house back to itself. A week later, we were back at City Hall. Drake read the final decision. Ownership of Elm Street is transferred to the city for the creation of the Matthews Room Children's Center. The Matthews family receives lifetime honorary rights and access to the caregiver support program. Michelle shook my hand. You did it. We did, I replied. And Mom. Lillian approached after the meeting. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I never wanted any of this. I know, I said. You were part of their fear. But now you're part of their peace. She handed me a silver key on a red string. This is for you. As a memento. Let it stay here, I said, placing it on the board's table. In the Matthews room. As a symbol that home is not property but choice. 3 months passed. The house had been renovated. A white facade, large windows, and inside wooden tables, books, paints, children's drawings. I stood at the entrance where a sign hung. The Matthews Room. For those who have learned not to fear the truth. My father sat nearby on a bench watching the children run. It's a beautiful house, he said. A warm table. Yes, I smiled. A good house. Irene came with lemonade, Mark with a camera, Michelle with documents. Even Lillian came with a pie that smelled just like it did on that first day. I stood in the middle of the crowd and for the first time felt that nothing was weighing me down inside. My father stroked my elbow. You did the right thing, he whispered. Anna would be proud. And you. He smiled. I'm just glad you didn't leave when I told you to go. We watched the children hang up their drawings. One boy hung up a sheet of paper with crooked letters that read, Home is when you're not afraid. I laughed briefly, easily, without pain. The air smelled of paint, pie, and the rain that was just beginning. 5 years. I work at the local library. Every Saturday I come to the Matthews room and read excerpts from that black notebook to the children. No names, no explanations. They listen and ask, is this a fairy tale? Maybe, I say. Or maybe it's the truth that has become good. The silver key on a red string still hangs on the wall. It glitters in the evening sun like a reminder. Wherever we are, there is always a door that can be opened not with fear, but with love. And every time I go outside, it seems to me that someone is quietly saying, a warm table, a good home. And I answer in my mind, yes, Dad, we're finally home.